Hello, and welcome to Quiet Nights, your gentle retreat into a world of calm and tranquility. Tonight, we invite you to unwind with a soothing story, crafted to ease your mind and guide you toward a restful night's sleep. But before we begin, take a deep, unhurried breath, and then another. Feel the weight of the day slowly melt away, like soft clouds drifting across the evening sky. Let go of any lingering thoughts, any tension that still clings to you. There's no rush, no expectations, only this quiet moment, just for you. As you listen, let the rhythm of the words lull you into a state of peaceful relaxation. Now close your eyes, settle in, and let the whispers of the night carry you away. Welcome to Quiet Nights. The March wind, a blustering herald, threw itself against the snug outbuilding tucked away on the grander estate's grounds. Inside, the promise of a firelit evening beckoned. This is where our narrative unfurls. Alara shouldered open the door of her haven, leaning into it to secure the latch against a particularly violent gust. Rain-slicked boots found their place on the welcome mat. The dripping umbrella leaned precariously beside the coat tree as she shrugged off her damp trench coat. A sigh escaped her lips, a whisper of relief against the storm's roar, as she swept wind-tangled strands from her brow. Her modest parcel of groceries landed softly on the compact kitchen counter. In like a lion, the old adage murmured in her mind, and out like a lamb. Mother Nature, it seemed, was embracing the leonine entrance with theatrical flair. A perfect night, truly, to draw the curtains tight and surrender to indoor comforts. No further skirmishes with the elements were planned. With the countertop toaster oven humming into its preheat cycle, Alara drifted across the winsome sitting room towards her bedroom. There, she eagerly shed her damp attire, embracing the soft embrace of favorite flannel pajamas. Perching on the bed's edge, she drew on the fussiest pair of woolen socks, stretching her liberated feet before her with profound satisfaction. The release from confining shoes after a long day was a small, perfect bliss. For a moment, bathed in the amber glow of her bedside lamp, Alara surveyed her sanctuary. How singularly blessed she felt these past few years, renting this converted carriage house adjacent to the historic main residence. During her sabbatical, here she wrestled with her manuscript on Maine Sentinel lighthouses. It was an ideal refuge, compact, orderly, imbued with a quiet charm. Her landlady resided nearby, a benevolent presence in the imposing old house sharing the property. This arrangement offered the autonomy of a detached dwelling without the burdens of extensive upkeep. Her bedroom possessed its own sweet character. The carriage house, long repurposed for living, boasted endearing hardwood floors, a functional kitchenette, and crucially, a hearth in the main room. Often, Alara found herself lost in contemplation, gazing from the kitchen window over the estate's sleeping gardens, feeling rather like a figure stepped from a storybook. Mustering resolve, she padded silently back across the polished floors to the kitchen. From the grocery bag emerged a container of takeaway macaroni and cheese. Lid discarded, it slid into the toaster oven, set for a slow bake, the kind that yielded a crust of gloriously toasted cheese. True comfort food demanded patience. The fireplace, modernized at some point with a gas insert, sprang to life with a vivacious flicker at the turn of a knob. Elara retrieved several notebooks and a pen from her satchel near the door. Work awaited her this evening. International Women's Day loomed. A historian friend, teaching high school, had posed an inspired inquiry. Knowing Elara's expertise, could she speak about women who had kept the lights? Elara, submerged in lighthouse lore for months, seized the stellar chance to illuminate the often overlooked contributions of female keepers. The challenge lay not in finding subjects, but in narrowing the field. Their stories were numerous and compelling. Settling into her preferred plush armchair, feet propped on the upholstered ottoman, she opened a notebook, her gaze sweeping across pages dense with research. Katerina Volkova surfaced first in her thoughts, the tireless tender of Robin's Reef Light in New York Harbor. To grasp Katerina's resolve, one had to begin at her origins. Unlike many women who inherited the keeper's mantle, Katerina Volkova wasn't born to a lighthouse family, nor even on American soil. In 1882, age 37, she journeyed from Germany to the United States, her young son, Jakob, in tow. Employment as a cook in a New Jersey boarding house led her to Johann Volkova, the Sandy Hook lightkeeper, a patron who began teaching her English. Closeness blossomed into marriage, transplanting her to the Sandy Hook light station. Thus, around the age of 40, Katerina first learned the intricate business of tending a beacon. Later, in 1885, Captain Volkova's transfer took them to Robin's Reef Light, a mile north of Staten Island. Compared to Sandy Hook, this station was starkly isolated, perched offshore on a submerged ledge. The initial sight depressed her profoundly. When I first came to Robin's Reef, she later confided, the sight of the water, whichever way I looked, made me lonesome. I refused to unpack my trunks at first, but gradually, a little at a time, I unpacked. After a while, they were all unpacked, and I stayed on. Soon after, the birth of her daughter, Maria, cemented the family of four's presence for the long haul. Elara paused, reflecting on Katerina's words. The woman's resolute fortitude struck her deeply. Widow, mother, immigrant, she had navigated available work, embraced a demanding occupation, and accepted even the profound isolation of this watery outpost. Her strength was formidable, yet continuously tested. In 1890, illness claimed Johann Volkova. His reputed last words, "Mind the light, Kate." Elara smiled faintly. Katerina seemed the sort who required no such instruction. Naturally, she assumed his full duties while raising two children. Despite her proven skill, her superiors doubted a woman's capacity for the role. While she minded the light with flawless proficiency, they persisted in seeking a male replacement. Yet, after several years, by 1885, they conceded. Katerina Volkova was officially appointed keeper of Robin's Reef Light. Alara's exhaustive inquiry confirmed that tending the lamp itself was merely the prologue to a keeper's duties. Katerina once remarked the light was more difficult to care for than a family of children. Daily, the lamp demanded attention, cleaning reflectors, scraping ice in winter's grip. Foul weather necessitated activating the fog siren. If it failed, she resorted to manually striking the fog bell until repairs were made. Concurrently, she remained a mother and homemaker. A 1906 New York Times piece quoted her saying she had as much housework as the Waldorf Astoria, a bastion of Gilded Age grandeur, Alara knew. Cooking, bed-making, cleaning, solitary daily tasks, even procuring supplies or ferrying her children to school on Staten Island required a mile-long row, undertaken alone. Alara struggled to fathom the sheer difficulty of everyday existence for such an isolated keeper. And of course, rescues were part of the unwritten job description. Katerina estimated saving at least 50 souls from drowning over her 33-year tenure. Miss Volkova retired in 1919, having witnessed Robin's Reef Light transition from kerosene to oil vapor lamps to electricity. Towards the end, the 5-room light station housed her son Jakob, now assistant keeper, his wife, and 5 grandchildren. Katerina spent her final years in a small Staten Island cottage, tending a garden, her gaze often drifting towards Robin's Reef Light. Upon her passing, the New York Post eulogized, "In the sight of the city of towers and the torch of liberty lived this sturdy little woman, proud of her work and content in it, keeping her lamp alight and her windows cleaned so that New York Harbor might be safe for ships that pass in the night." Yes, Alara affirmed silently, Katerina Volkova absolutely belonged in her presentation. Setting the papers aside, she rose from the embracing chair and returned to the toaster oven. Opening the small door, revealed bubbling contents beneath a delectable toasted mantle. The tantalizing aroma of sharp cheddar drifted across the counter. Dinner was served. She slid the macaroni and cheese onto a plain white plate, retrieved a fork, and carefully navigated back to her fireside perch. Curling contentedly into the chair, she placed the plate on the small adjacent table. Steam rose invitingly. A moment's patience was required before the first bite. Turning back to her notebook, she leafed through the pages, seeking her next lighthouse heroine. Her finger traced the notes on Flora May Selden. Unlike Katerina, Flora had known several posts before achieving headkeeper status. Before arriving at Maryland's Turkey Point Light in 1922 with her husband, she'd served alongside him as assistant keeper at no fewer than 4 lighthouses in neighboring Virginia. She remained assistant keeper when their tenure at Turkey Point began. But her husband passed in 1925, leaving her a widow at 43. Intriguingly, she was not much younger than Katerina when she sought the head keeper position. She immediately assumed the duties without official appointment. Yet despite 2 decades of experience, confirmation proved difficult. In contrast to Katerina's case, Flora's gender wasn't the obstacle. Indeed, 3 previous Turkey Point keepers had been women. Instead, The civil service balked at her age, deeming her too old. Fortunately, Flora was not easily dissuaded. She appealed the ruling, ultimately securing the appointment directly from President Calvin Coolidge, becoming the sole female keeper ever granted a presidential appointment. Her salary was set at $1,140 annually, roughly 18,000 in contemporary currency. Much like Katerina, Flora managed familial duties alongside tending the light. She raised 3 children, Mabel, Jessie Olga, and Charles. Alara recalled an old black and white photograph showing Flora and young Charles amidst a flock of turkeys near the lighthouse, a necessity given the family's responsibility for their own provisions. Reaching the nearest town meant either a long 14-mile drive or an 8-mile boat journey across the Chesapeake. Furthermore, unloading boat supplies involved navigating 137 steps down to a floating dock, then hoisting heavy goods up with a windlass and winch. Unsurprisingly, they maintained a garden and livestock for sustenance. Flora diligently performed all the standard keeper tasks. Before electrification in 1943, this included replenishing lamp oil and trimming wicks. On one occasion, the fog bell mechanism failed. She ascended to the 1,200-pound bell and manually struck it with its 50-pound clapper 4 times a minute for nearly an hour. During this exertion, she missed a call from her son-in-law announcing her granddaughter's birth. Alara chuckled at the image of such a remarkably fit grandmother. Nevertheless, Flora confessed, I was never more exhausted in my whole life. A sentiment Alara readily believed. For 22 years, Flora faithfully executed this demanding role, retiring at 65 in 1947. Reflecting on her lighthouse service, she famously quipped, "Oh, it was an easy light chore, but my feet got tired, and climbing the tower has given me fallen arches." Her departure marked the end of an era. She was the last serving civilian female lightkeeper in the United States. Thanks to her and her 3 capable female predecessors, Washingtonian magazine once dubbed Turkey Point Light the feminist lighthouse of the Chesapeake. Like Katerina, Flora never relinquished her affection for her station, retiring just 6 miles away, where its steadfast beam remained visible in the night's darkness. Alara paused, jotting down key points. Then, with anticipation, she set the pages aside and reached for her dinner. As she savored the creamy, cheesy pasta, her gaze drifted idly towards the dancing flames in the hearth. It was that languid hour of evening when relaxation deepened and the mind began to roam. The fire conjured images of the unremitting duty of tending wicks and flames in pre-electric beacons. Male or female, all keepers shouldered immense responsibilities. She doubted her own capacity for such a life. Luxuriating in the final bites of her delicious meal, Alara rose once more and carried her plate to the sink. The kitchen air held a noticeable chill now, proximity to the window and door amplifying the night's cold breath. She retrieved a sweater from a nearby chair back, slipping it on. The cheerful red kettle came off the back burner, filled and set to boil. Its promise of warmth hung in the air. Returning to her study nook, she reclaimed her notebook. A few more page turns revealed the perfect subsequent candidate for her talk. It felt incomplete to omit the woman arguably America's most celebrated lightkeeper, Isolde Soraya Lowell, known universally as Izzy, second of Horatio Lowell's 4 children. Horatio became only the second keeper at Lime Rock Light in Newport, Rhode Island, starting in 1857. Completed just 3 years prior, Lime Rock wasn't terribly remote, situated on a ledge a mere 220 yards from shore. Yet it remained an island. Every necessity required retrieval from the mainland via rowboat. Young Izzy rapidly attained exceptional skill with the oars, a fortunate development. Within 4 months of the family's arrival, Horatio suffered a disabling stroke, rendering him unable to work. 15-year-old Izzy stepped forward, assisting her mother with all keeper duties, while also caring for her incapacitated father and chronically ill younger sister. Adding to this, she rode her siblings to school in Newport each weekday. Renowned as one of the town's finest swimmers, Izzy's heroism manifested early. Even before the lighthouse move, at age 12, she had rescued 4 men whose boat overturned using her rowboat. Then, at 27, she dashed into icy waters, shoeless, joining her brother to save 2 soldiers whose vessel capsized during a snowstorm. This act garnered significant acclaim. One soldier gifted her a gold watch, while his Fort Adams comrades collected $218 in gratitude. Ultimately, in 1881, she became the sole woman awarded the government's prestigious Gold Life-Saving Medal, recognizing her rescue of 2 more Fort Adams soldiers who fell through the ice while traversing Newport Harbor. In 1877, Izzy's mother grew ill, passing the following year. Izzy was appointed head keeper in 1879, earning $750 annually, the highest lightkeeper salary in the nation at that time. Alara's thoughts were interrupted by the kettle's genial summons. Moving to the counter, she silenced the burner, lifted the pot, and poured steaming water carefully over a peppermint tea bag nestled in a mug. The window pane above the sink rattled briefly, buffeted by the wind. Wrapping her sweater tighter, Alara carried the fragrant, hot beverage back to her fireside chair. She blew gently across the surface, setting it down to steep, then returned her focus to the notes. Izzy never maintained a formal rescue log, but the press eagerly disseminated tales of her exploits far and wide. It's estimated she saved 18 lives during her 54 years on the island. Reports of her remarkable deeds appeared in prominent publications like Harper's Weekly and the New York Tribune. Izzy evolved into a cherished national icon, meeting admirals, presidents, and luminaries, such as the feminist Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Her final documented rescue occurred at age 63, when a visiting friend inadvertently capsized her own rowboat. By 64, she was a beneficiary of the Carnegie Hero Fund, receiving a monthly stipend of $30. The great lady of Lime Rock Light passed away in 1911, aged 69. Bells tolled, flags flew at half-mast, and 400 mourners attended her funeral. She would undoubtedly have felt immense pride seeing the station renamed Ida Lewis Rock Light, an unprecedented honor for a U.S. lightkeeper. Songs have even been composed in her memory. Alara set her notebook down, lifting her tea, blowing softly again. Her gaze returned to the kitchen window, now a dark mirror reflecting the room's warmth. Outside, the cold rain lashed against the glass. Occasional gusts drove fat drops against the pane with a louder, insistent patter. She pictured the countless dark nights keepers endured, alone, performing their duties amidst the worst weather imaginable. Savoring the security of her sequestered haven by the fire, Alara knew with sudden clarity who her fourth and final lighthouse heroine must be. Returning to her primary focus, Maine, she opened her notebook to the pages detailing the teenage heroine, Anya Burgess. Anya moved with her family to the profoundly isolated lighthouse on Matanicus Rock in 1853. She was the fourth of 9 children born to lightkeeper Silas Burgess and his wife, Patience. Sources describe the rock as one of the most remote outposts on the eastern seaboard, a barren isle. The nearest supply point, Rockland, lay 23 nautical miles away. Anya's brother, Barnaby, harbored no interest in light keeping, preferring life aboard fishing vessels. Meanwhile, seeking supplementary income, Silas also spent time fishing and lobstering, selling his catch in Rockland. Consequently, at the tender age of 15, Anya assumed many of her father's light-keeping responsibilities. This she managed while caring for 3 younger sisters and her chronically ill mother. Anya's role as de facto assistant keeper was complicated by the lard lamps she tended. The New England Historical Society quoted her. Sometimes they would not burn so well when first lighted, especially in cold weather when the oil got cold. Then some nights I could not sleep a wink all night, and many nights I have watched the light my part of the night, thinking nervously what might happen should the light fail. Yet she persevered faithfully, adding, "In all these years, I always put the lamps in order, and I lit them at sunset." Despite the weighty mantle she bore at such a formative age, Anya found time to study past keepers' logs, which chronicled devastating storms. Reading of one that obliterated the lighthouse entirely instilled a fear that the current keeper's house lacked sufficient strength. She relocated her mother's bedroom to what she deemed the most structurally sound section, a prescient move that would soon save Patience. In January 1856, Silas grew anxious. The biannual supply ship had failed its autumn journey due to inclement weather. Concerned about winter provisions, both food and lighthouse fuel, he instructed Anya to mind the lights while he sailed to Rockland. With Barnaby away fishing, Anya was left with her sisters, her ailing mother, and the critical duty of keeping the beacons lit. Shortly after Silas's departure, a monstrous gale struck. For 3 days, it battered the island, damaging the very part of the keeper's house where Patience had previously slept. The storm raged relentlessly, eventually inundating the island in knee-deep, frigid water. Anya was forced to move her family to the upper floor of the North Lighthouse Tower for safety. Over her mother's protests, during a brief lull, she waded through the churning water to the chicken coop. Astonishingly, she rescued all but one of her hens, shepherding them to refuge within the tower. Before the storm finally subsided, a colossal wave completely demolished the keeper's house. This tempest became legendary in New England annals. Silas remained stranded, unable to return for 4 weeks. Throughout this entire period, Anya kept the lights burning, undoubtedly saving innumerable mariners from disaster on Matanicus Rock. Thanks to her salvaged chickens, she sustained her family on a daily ration of 1 cup of cornmeal and 1 egg each. According to the Historical Society, 17-year-old Anya reflected on the ordeal. Some reason, I know not why, I had no misgivings and went on with my work as usual. For 4 weeks, owing to rough weather, no landing could be effected on the rock. During this time, we were without the assistance of any male member of our family, though at times greatly exhausted by my labors. But once did the lights fail. Under God, I was able to perform all my accustomed duties as well as my father's. Alara paused, taking another sip of tea before turning the page. In stark contrast to Izzy Lowell's celebrated exploits, Anya's heroism remained largely unheralded at the time. In 1861, her father, having not supported President Lincoln, was replaced as keeper, lighthouse appointments being political. Anya, however, had grown attached to the windswept isle and requested permission to stay and train the new keeper, Captain Jonas Grant. As fate decreed, she fell in love with Grant's son, Isaiah. They married and served together as assistant keepers on Matanicus Rock for 14 years, raising 4 children there. In 1875, after 22 years in residence, Anya finally left the island. She and Isaiah were appointed keepers at Whitehead Light, serving another 15 years before retirement. Anya's final known letter spoke of recurring dreams about the Matanicus rock lamps. I wonder, she mused, if the care of the lighthouse will follow my soul. This poignant closing thought made Alara pause, contemplating all these women. An adamant conviction seemed to bind them, a certainty that the light was a calling they were bound to answer. They arrived at this challenging, isolated existence through varied paths, yet lived it with uniform, steadfast dedication. Often, their sole reward was the quiet knowledge of duty fulfilled. With a sigh of satisfaction, Alara closed her notebooks. She felt prepared to share these resonant stories. Glancing obliquely, she registered her empty mug. Simultaneously, a profound weariness settled over her. Like Anya's 4-day tempest, the March winds continued their assault on the small kitchen window. Mother Nature seemed to be whispering that it was time to seek refuge in bed. Setting aside papers and books, Alara stood and stretched. She carried the empty cup to the kitchen, placing it gently in the sink. After tidying her satchel for the morning, she extinguished the fireplace's flame, leaving the sitting room cloaked in nocturnal darkness. Her welcoming berth waited, tucked in the corner, piled high with its downy comforter. Alara sat on the bed's edge, peeled off her socks, and burrowed her feet deep beneath the covers, toes seeking the cool tautness where the sheet met the mattress. Pulling the duvet up to her chin, She rolled onto her side and switched off the bedside lamp. The amber glow vanished. She lay enveloped in darkness, listening to the insistent rhythm of early March rain drumming on the roof. A yawn escaped her as she sank deeper into the pillows. Lulled by the storm's cadence, eyes closed, her mind drifted. She envisioned herself high within a tower on some remote, wave-battered island, expertly trimming a wick, coaxing a flame to life. Far from feeling isolated, a sense of profound safety enveloped her, cocooned by the ocean's surge and the storm's symphony. In this waking dream, she understood herself as a fixed point, a creator of light amidst the vast darkness. She knew she was the steadfast presence through the unfolding night. Summer's warmth lingered into evening, bathing the Provençal town of Corbelin in a serene light, a gentle languor settling over its streets. Here, in this tranquil corner of southern France, blossoms unfurled everywhere, a fragrant tapestry woven amongst the charming, sun-drenched houses. Colors vied for attention, the vibrant hues of nature challenging the painted facades, each striving to outshine the other in sheer cheerfulness. One particular dwelling, anchored in the town's central square, basked in the late sun's opulent glow. Its walls, a rich butter yellow, were punctuated by shutters of startling emerald green. Oleanders and acacias clustered near its face, their blossoms, pinks and whites on the oleander, delicate yellows amidst the acacia's oval leaves, dappling the cozy exterior with nature's artistry. Life ambled here. Figures strolled without hurry, their pace unburdened, embodying a quiet contentment, a mastery of the simple pleasure of being. From a first-floor window, its green shutters flung wide, a tall, slender man observed the square. His beard was a startling crimson, matching the fire in his hair, while his blue-green eyes absorbed the scene with quiet satisfaction. Elias was his name, a transplant from the colder north, having journeyed through Paris before finding solace here. Corbelin had captivated him instantly, its allure deepening with every passing day. He often wrote to his sister of the South's benevolent warmth, the sun that seemed to clarify his thoughts, scattering inspiration like pollen on the breeze. Elias painted, though recognition still eluded him. His existence revolved around art, the act of creation, the feel of charcoal and pigment beneath his fingers as he translated the world's beauty onto canvas, offered profound fulfillment. His simple bedchamber, the blossoming orchards he adored, all found vibrant life through his brush. These past months, Corbelin's orchards, heavy with peak bloom, had been a particular delight, fueling a period of ardent, joyful work. Tonight, however, respite called, having just captured the essence of peach trees, their delicate pink-white petals seeming both fragile and exotic. He craved mental stillness. He had reveled in rendering their blushing blossoms, the woody architecture of branch and leaf, contrasting them with the golds, coppers, reds, and yellows he employed for the sun-baked wheat fields, textures and depths that made the canvas pulse with life. Turning from the window, Elias prepared for an evening walk. His plan: a visit to his cherished spot by the river, a detour through the wheat fields, and finally, a wander beneath the burgeoning stars. This was his preferred mode of relaxation, immersion in the town's charm, gathering sensory threads for future work. He moved through his small room, furnished sparsely with a turmeric yellow bed frame, 2 chairs, a table, retrieving necessities, handkerchief, coins, his blue coat, whitewashed walls and red-tiled floors served as a neutral ground for the explosion of color from his own canvases hung everywhere, transforming the cozy space into a vibrant gallery. He plucked his yellow straw hat from its wall hook, its starkness a bold counterpoint to his fiery hair and beard, the very image of impassioned artistry. Lacing his comfortable brown shoes, he exited, closing the door softly. He passed the guest room, earmarked for future decoration with more paintings, descended the stairs, and emerged onto the gray cobblestones, where tufts of grass pushed defiantly through the cracks. Elias ambled towards the Rhone, the river that ribboned through Corbelin. By its banks he found peace. Daylight hours were spent observing riverside flora, mentally dissecting the greens, noting how shifting light altered their appearance, planning his painterly attack. Night transformed the river into a mirror for the heavens, the stars' reflections becoming rippling, pale yellow curves upon the dark water. He walked without urgency, his focus less on arrival than on absorption, his mind sifting through nascent ideas for the next canvas. Creative energy hummed within him. Every detail, every nuance, held the potential for artistic immortalization. To Elias, the world was a subject waiting, each facet deserving of translation into paint. He saw townsfolk returning home or heading towards the familiar cafe he also frequented. Raised in a similar rural setting, he felt an affinity for the farmers he encountered, their sun-weathered faces compelling subjects that connected him to a broader humanity. The simplicity he'd craved after Paris's overwhelming glamour was palpable here. The grand city, an artist's paradise in many ways, hadn't suited his need for quiet contemplation amidst nature. A group passed him, their chatter and laughter echoing briefly. Women in voluminous, colorful cotton skirts and white blouses, scarves knotted at their necks. Men in equally vibrant attire, their faces bronzed by fieldwork. Tired, yet visibly content. Elias smiled inwardly, already composing the portrait in his mind. Ultramarine blues, ruby reds, emerald greens for their clothes, set against the brilliant yellow sun and fields rendered in oranges and reds. People, he mused, possessed an ineffable quality, a living rhythm like a wondrous, unending song. He felt compelled to transcribe in pigment. The murmur of the river drew him from his thoughts. He had arrived. The water, clear and blue, now caught the orange-yellow fire of the setting sun. A sigh escaped him. The timing was perfect. He sought his usual spot on the grassy bank near the Pont de Reginel, a drawbridge he often studied. Facing the structure, he sometimes made preliminary sketches, though he preferred painting directly en plein air. Tonight, however, was purely for repose. Settling onto the cushiony grass, he placed his straw hat beside him, drew his knees to his chest, and wrapped his arms around them. A faint smile touched his lips. Peace settled upon him here, beside the Rhone. The river's gentle flow soothed his shoulders, clearing his mind. For a time, thought ceased. He simply gazed, absorbing the landscape. Thick bushes leaning towards the cool water, birds calling evening greetings. The river's surface painted with sunset hues. Red brick walls, streaked with white, supported the dark brown drawbridge, its lifting chains a rusty maroon. He admired the bridge, simple yet perfectly harmonized with its surroundings, standing sentinel over the sun-dappled water. The colors, he noted, existed in exquisite accord. This river flowed long before his arrival and would continue long after his departure. Its eternal movement captivated him, mirroring the permanence he craved for his art. Perhaps one day someone would view his painting of this scene, and this very river, unchanged, would still be flowing. He sat, lost in this contemplation. The Rhone held him utterly enchanted. His breathing seemed to synchronize with the water's current, rising and falling rhythmically like the ripples over submerged stones. Soft grass cushioned him. A light breeze ruffled his red hair. Closing his eyes, he felt the coolness on his eyelids, a welcome sensation. He began to paint the scene internally. His mind conjured his brush, handle stained with years of accumulated color, poised above a blank canvas. First, the bridge, precise lines defining its structure, nutty brown columns emerging, followed by burnt sienna strokes for the chain links. Then, the red and white bricks, his mental strokes becoming freer, looser. He favored a bold style, thin strokes laid close, creating an image that vibrated with energy. Next, the river materialized. Strokes of cobalt blue swirled with white, flowing across the imagined canvas as water glides over rock. Then the vegetation, jade, emerald, moss green, applied with circular dabs here, rapid straight lines there, perhaps touches of brown mixed in, and a scattering of tall ochre reeds. A smile bloomed on Elias's face. Even this mental act of painting brought immense joy. Opening his eyes moments later, he found the world darker, the sun fully submerged. Though he could linger, watching evening deepen into night, the thought of a warm drink, perhaps a bite to eat, beckoned. He decided on his favorite cafe. He appreciated its coffee and its location right on the street, offering the choice of social immersion or solitary observation. With a final look around, Elias stood, donned his hat, and headed back towards the town center, mentally vowing a swift return to the riverbank. The cafe occupied a narrow lane. Patrons could choose the bustling interior room with its pool table, the terrace perfect for night sky viewing, or the small tables spilling onto the lane itself, ideal for people watching. Tonight, Elias selected an outdoor table and ordered coffee. While waiting, he studied the cobblestones, noting their similarity to those near his yellow house. Gaslight bathed the yellow cafe walls, lending them an almost animate quality, full of movement and depth. The same light spilled onto the cobblestones, transforming their gray into a rich, surprising purple. Houses lined the street, many fronted by trees. His vantage point offered a perfect view of both the terrestrial scene and the celestial one unfolding above. Stars emerged, pinpricks of light multiplying against the darkening canvas. Sipping his warm coffee, he contrasted this scene with the riverbank tableau. This was mundane life, a cafe, a street, houses. Yet in Elias's mind, the yellows, purples, grays, browns, and blues were already swirling, coalescing, fixing this view. His blue-green eyes reflected the lamp's yellow glow. He might have appeared entranced, but inwardly, a blank canvas was undergoing a wondrous transformation. The stars overhead shimmered with lemony hues, striking him as utterly magical. Coffee finished, Elias left the cafe, directing his steps towards the wheat fields near his home. An old, beloved mill stood just beyond them. He preferred visiting the fields at night. The view of the sky was unobstructed, vast. There was space to lie back and stargaze for hours. He loved the stark contrast, the warm, golden delicacy of the field, all yellows and browns, against the cool, dark mystery of the night sky, draped in blues and blacks. En route, he passed a field of irises, row upon row of lovely blue blooms, punctuating the landscape. He'd painted them recently, pleased with how their movement seemed captured on canvas, mirroring their sway in the evening breeze. He found their wild charm compelling, rendering them with broad, confident strokes. Further on stood almond trees, currently blossoming, subjects he tackled several times. Their thick charcoal bark, strong and rough, provided a striking contrast to the delicate pink and white flowers crowning them, reminiscent of cherry blossoms. Painting them, he'd felt a pang of longing for Japan, wishing he could study its abundant sakura. For these pieces, he'd exercised unusual care with each petal, respecting the tree's exquisite individuality, proud that this reverence translated into his art. Shortly past the almond trees, he reached the wheat field. He paused, watching the airy stalks sway, catching the faint moonlight, which gave them an ethereal luminescence. The surrounding grassy verge looked inviting. Selecting a spot, he lay down, removing his hat and resting it on his chest. The distant mill creaked intermittently in the breeze. Crickets chirped nearby. These were the sights and sounds he had sought, leaving Paris behind. On nights like this, gratitude washed over him. Elias closed his eyes, letting the sounds envelop him. The rustle of wheat mimicked the distant rush of a river. He yearned sometimes not just to paint what he saw, but to capture the entire sensory experience, the sounds, the feelings. Opening his eyes, he gazed upward. A crescent moon hung amidst countless glittering stars. The unobstructed view was precisely why he loved coming here at day's end. Just him, the field, the mill, and the immense nocturnal expanse. He often marveled that people reduced starry skies to mere white dots on black. Even now, his eyes perceived a symphony of color. The sky wasn't black, but a deep, resonant blue, darker than his ultramarine pigment, yet radiant like the lapis lazuli stone it derived from. Passing clouds added animation, creating waves of white and gray against the dark backdrop, like broad strokes on a vast celestial canvas. And the stars, they hypnotized him, not white, but golden, pink, emerald, scarlet. Gemstones scattered across dark blue velvet. While the stars felt magical, mysterious, the moon offered familiar comfort, its warm, pale yellow glow like an old friend. Painting the night sky was a recurring desire, fueled by the complex emotions it evoked, yet he always hesitated, lost in the contemplation, postponing the attempt. One day, he promised himself, he would paint it, perhaps with cypress trees looming over the Rhone, or maybe just as it was now, above the wheat fields. Lying in bed, he often imagined the process, the colors he'd use, the techniques to replicate its otherworldly presence exactly as he perceived it. Blinking, his mind adrift, Elias's eyes mirrored the starry brilliance above, light reflecting within them as the sunset had reflected in the Rhone. Images swirled, blue clouds driven by wind, the eternal river, delicate pink blossoms fluttering, bands of cobalt and ultramarine mingling with white and orange, long shapes of dark green. Drifting towards sleep, he dreamed. He dreamed of huge, radiant yellow stars, of the constant river, of flowers dancing in the breeze, of swirling colors and bold forms. In his slumber, the painting of the wild, starry night that watched over him began to take shape.